Well, let's get more now on those humanitarian pauses in Gaza. Jennifer Tierney is the Executive Director of Médecins Sans Frontières in Australia, and she joins me now from Sydney. Jennifer Tierney, thank you. Now, the White House says the pause will allow people to get out of harm's way and humanitarian deliveries in. Will it?
It is a very small step in the right direction. But what we are seeing right now in Gaza is that there is no safe space. So after those 4 hours when the bombing begins, the question remains, where are people going to go? You know, they're told to flee hospitals or flee refugee camps or schools right before they're about to be bombed. And then they move to the south. Well, the south isn't safe either. 30% of the deaths in Gaza at this point have occurred in the south. So the question remains, what more is the international community going to do to protect civilian lives?
So if there are no safe places in your view, where are civilians going? As you say, there is nowhere to go.
They have a wicked problem. I mean, we are seeing civilians who are choosing to uproot their families and move to the south seeking safety. They get there, they're essentially homeless, they have no water, they have no food, and the local community isn't able to absorb them because they're already stressed enough themselves. So then they move back to the north, and there they're bombed, and they die, and they suffer injuries. I mean, it is an impossible situation. And so while 4 hours a day to get aid in might touch a very tip of the surface, what we're talking about is a medical system that is completely decimated. And until it gets repaired, there is no way that we are going to be able to get the medical aid that people need after suffering through these onslaughts of bombings.
Well, as you allude to, we know hospitals are struggling with supplies. Clean water and food are very scarce. Can you give us a sense of what the conditions are like for Gazans now and what they need?
You know, our medical teams are under immense stress. And what they are seeing is they're treating people under the absolute worst circumstances. People who have lost limbs have to go through surgeries with very little anesthetic. After they have had an amputation, they're getting massive infections because they have to be taken out of the hospital as soon as possible to make room for others. And they're going into totally unsanitary conditions where they can't actually care for their wounds. We're getting input from people that they are trying to resolve infections without medicines, with just herbal type of remedies. And it's really, it is an unconscionable situation to put doctors and nurses into.
Now, you say these 4-hour pauses will just really only scratch the surface, but will they be enough to get the supplies in, at least some that the hospitals need, for example?
No. I mean, there is no way at this point without a sustained ceasefire that we can actually repair, rehabilitate the facilities that have sustained such damage. There's just no way. The infrastructure isn't there. We will be able to hopefully provide some surgical kits. MSF will certainly do its best to bring in all of our materials, to set up makeshift settings where we can treat people. But right now, when you're treating people on the floor in the hospitals that are completely overcrowded and not able to take on, those who are suffering from long-term illnesses, diabetes, cancer, on and on, a 4-hour humanitarian pause each day is just not going to scratch the surface of what's needed there.
Now, we know almost 11,000 civilians in Gaza have been killed on the official numbers. Will this help to limit civilian casualties at all, do you think?
Limiting civilian casualties would mean that places where civilians are seeking shelter, places where civilians live, are protected from being military targets. And that is what needs to happen in order to protect civilian lives. For instance, when we have a 4-hour pause and we are told, for instance, to evacuate a hospital, how do you move the ICU patients? How do you move the babies in the NICUs? How do you move patients in post-operative care when there is no other facility for them to go to? So again, wicked problems that humanitarians and people of Gaza are being presented with, that a 4-hour pause each day will ameliorate to some small degree, but will not resolve.
And I suppose it's worth noting as well, when we're talking about moving people, they're basically on foot.
They are mostly on foot, escaping on roads that are damaged, with infrastructure that is damaged, again, with real no place to go at the end of the day. One of our staff this week, Mohammed Al-Ahel, was killed in a refugee camp along with all of his family. And so even if you are moving and even if you are seeking shelter in your own home, there is really no safe place for Gazans right now.
You mentioned a ceasefire. Is that the only solution? What could be done that goes further than this 4-hour pause daily?
We need a full ceasefire, and we need it for Gazans and for Israelis. I mean, no civilian should have their medical infrastructures targeted by a combatant. And so both sides need to be protected. And the international community has to be stronger in calling for a ceasefire, and that includes the Australian government. So we are pushing for that. We are advocating on behalf of the civilians and the medical staff, the nurses, the doctors in Gaza, to get that so that we can start to provide the humanitarian care that people not only deserve, but have a right to under international humanitarian law.
Jennifer Tierney, we appreciate your time today. Thank you for making it.